and I'm standing up today. For this vlog, I wanted to talk to you about another recent make. So I talked about my shirts, but some people who have been on sessions recently, you know, I've been up to Made My Wardrobe, one of my favourite workshop spaces. It's bright, it's run by Lydia, and it's just a really welcoming space. They do really great workshops. So at the weekend with my sewing wife Emma, I'm going to the art chat from a few months ago. We did the banner making workshop, and this is my finished piece. And I just wanted to show you what I was doing, kind of where it started, and how I got here. So it's all about scrapbusting. So I had this idea a few months ago, and I messaged Lydia about, can I bring my own fabric? She's like, of course. But what I was really thinking was, how can I make use of my scraps? I'll show you them. So on my Kallax unit at the moment, I've got one tub which is full of useful scraps. So something that I can cut out a pocket from, pocket lining or a facing. That goes in the Kallax unit. Then I've got this bag, which is literally some kind of upholstery fabric. I've turned it into essentially a sack. And those are my big medium pieces, which are not quite big enough for a pocket piece. Or maybe they're strips of fabric. Like, let's have a look. I've got a random kind of few there. So some of them could be, actually some of those went in to take up to Bristol. So like, here's a good example, a white piece, like, I feel like throwing that away. So I've got this big bag. So this bit of canvas that I printed on at some point in the past. So I've got this bag of stuff. It's about half full at the moment. Then this old pillowcase. Actually, it's not a pillowcase. It was an old duvet, and I've lined it. So this has got my teeny tiny bits. So we're talking threads that get pulled out, the bits you cut off, the seam allowances, like real scraggly bits. So all of that is in this. So my idea, I was thinking about, I had a few ideas for the banner quote, so the ones they've done in the past, some lots of different quotes and things. So they kind of have a limit to letters, what they suggest you can get done in time. And so I thought about a few quotes that mean something to me, and I went round houses thinking about something that was maybe sewing specific, something from Bodge Club that me and my sewing wife have, like keep your fabric close and you unpick it closer. And it's like, I don't know if that's me. I really wanted it to be about me, something that I identify with. So on my desk, opposite where I work, I've got this post-it note. And this has been on my desk for a few years, and it sits opposite to remind me to work on one project. Whatever the to-do list is, I can only do one thing at once. So can't do it all. We can't. Physically impossible. So that's there, and because I like doodling and stuff, so I've got all those different fonts. So that spoke to me. So that was my idea. That was my starting point, and I thought, well, how can I incorporate all the scraps? And over the last few years, I've been kind of playing with using my scraps, as you saw on Sewing Bee in series 10, I think it was. It could have been series 9, where they created a bag from interfacing, a layer of interfacing, a layer of scraps which are positioned, and then a layer of organza, and then that's quilted down, and then they made a bag of some kind from it. And so I've played with that before. Unfortunately, because we're moving house, I've only got one example. So I've done the things that I want to show you, I think, are not packed away. I put them, they're normally hanging up behind me, so you see them during sessions. I put them almost away. So I've had a play with a few things. Oh, it's really close up. So my first kind of having a look at how to scrap bust is this, which is just interfacing And then I've kind of cut the pieces. I don't think I would have cut the pieces down, but I've chosen very square or triangular pieces, and then I've zigzagged over, and I shaped it to A4 just as a standard size because that was my first play. That got me very excited about how I can use my scraps in a useful way. So creating essentially a new fabric by patchworking stuff together. It's essentially what I'm doing, but interfacing to keep it stable together. I was worried about the frayed edges. This is only ever just hung up. It's been hung up on the wall so I can always see it. So when I get round to using up some scraps, I can have a look and be inspired. And I've always just, it's really nice to see some of my old projects. So skirt, a lyra dress, a couple of tops. I think that's just general scrap. One of my first skirts, a shirt dress. Yeah, the point. So there's lots of memories in this one piece. And then I tried again. I thought, what can I use a square piece for that I can really start to play and use more scraps up? So I thought sewing machine cover. It's just a few rectangles. So I measured my machine because it's just got a really boring grey cover, a big pocket. I thought, that's boring. I can probably use up some scraps. So I played with the organza and cotton layer this time, and so no interfacing, and I decided to essentially sew up most of the sides, leaving a gap, kind of like a pocket, and then putting all the little scrappy bits in and then quilting it. However, when I did my first panel, I shoved way too much in, way too much. It was so hard to sew and quilt over. So I'm so annoyed with myself that I wasted time and effort. So I'd already pre-shoved some stuff into the other pockets, so I'd prepared so I could just then quilt. So I was then having to remove a lot of the extras. However, I did finish it a while ago, and it is one of the messiest things I've ever uploaded onto Instagram. Like, it's not pretty, but it's pretty cool in some ways. So this is it in its entirety. So each side, even the top with the hole, has been quilted. And again, you can just go in and look. Well, ugly, just random quilting. See the colours and just some of the fabrics. So I've got some Wonder Woman fabric, florals from various dresses. There's some flannel from when I did pads, dress I made for a special occasion, etc., etc. It's just got raw edges because it doesn't need to be formal. It's just for me an experiment. So it is weighty, it's hefty, but it's an experiment and it's a useful item. So that covers my bonita. I didn't get around to adding a pocket because there's already so much going on. So you can see, angle it, you can see all the textures, all the bumps and ridges from how much it was shoved. So this is the stuff removed. So I've managed to create a layer. This pink section, I don't have much pink, but it's there. So things are all shoved and quilted. So yeah, a really interesting way to use up your teeny tiny scraps. And I'd do it again, but I'd probably do it slightly differently. I won't pocket it. I'd go bit by bit rather than just shoving and hoping for the best. So it's not pretty, but you could totally manipulate where the colours go more. So you could have a red side, blue, etc. So then it's more tonal, whereas this is just very random. And I think I did move this fabric a bit so you could see the faces more because it was tucked under. So you can see the Wonder Woman. And I think there's a Batwoman in there as well. So yeah, and there's threads and fabric and offcuts and just all the small bits that are a bit useless. So that was kind of how things progressed. And learning from that, because being creative, you've got to learn from all this. Which one came next? Not sure actually. I've got two here, both rectangular again. So I've gone back to just quilting a square, as it were. So these layers are organza, interfacing, and then just layering up some textures. So this was more purposeful, as you can see. You can see the interfacing, it doesn't cover all of it, so these yellow scraps here. But tonally, I started with the reds, pinks, and moved like a rainbow, and then I was getting a bit bored. And I added different sizes, so I was using threads as well, quite a lot, just to see. And rather than my original attempt of quilting kind of checkered, so at 90 degrees to each other, I just did one line down, so I didn't bother going across. So that's just a big gap of interfacing there. Yeah, but I was just really curious how it would come out with all the threads. It's really interesting. It looks like hair. It's a bit disconcerting, but interesting. It's much lighter than how I shoved so much in before, but it's more purposeful, which I quite like. Another one which I must have created at a similar time, where you can see I've quilted both vertically and horizontally, bigger pieces and all fabric. So there's interfacing on the back, there's organza on most of the front until I ran out. So you can see the brighter colour here. And this is a quilted square. It's under there that I've used. And again, lots of fabrics that are very familiar from sewing past. Again, haven't got plans of this. It was more about just creating and playing and seeing how things can turn out. And I really love that the organza doesn't cover all of it. So it's almost like a comparison, like how does it turn out when you just have that interfacing in the fabric? And how much the organza, the really thin layer of fabric on top, takes away that brightness of this lovely yellow cotton and floral. How much it kind of distracts from that, the original colours, it really dulls it down. So yeah, that was just fabric bits. So no threads, no yarns, nothing like that. So taking these previous experiments and kind of scrapbusting, I realised that if I created a bigger piece using interfacing as the base, I could use that fabric either to cut letters out of or to use as a base fabric and create a banner straight on one of these. So that's what I decided to do for my banner workshop, was get my scraps out and using this idea of one thing at a time. I thought about being really conceptual and the idea that the mind is really busy with ideas. I can't switch off. There's always something going on in my head, whether I'm thinking about what I need to do today. Oh my God, look how cute that dog is. Oh my God, did I remember to post the letter? Letterboxes, why are they red? They used to be green, and just, thoughts just non-stop until I fall asleep. And even then, dreams are bizarre. Anyway, so this idea that I need to slow down, actually creating this busy piece, using all the threads to kind of symbolize that busyness. So I thought about having that integrated within my letters and like sewing them behind. And then when it came to the banner workshop and talking about ideas, sketching out, using that post-it note, and having finished a big, I'm not sure how big that is actually. Let's say 1 metre by 1.5 meters. It's not quite, but we'll say it's about that. So creating that base, when it's so big, I realised that by adding that extra layer of symbolism, it's going to distract. I'd have to do the letters differently to how I've done them. For that to really have impact, they'd have to be all the same font, and yeah, they'd probably have to just be black letters. And I felt like trying to make it more conceptual and arty was too much for what I wanted and wanted to hang. So I stripped back my idea to the post-it note, which I'll show you again. So just one thing at a time. I doodled it in different fonts. I had a little play with it. One day, sat at my desk, just reminded me to slow down a bit. And I thought, I want to stay true to this post-it note, which is likely to get lost at any minute. It's starting to, it's lost its stick. It's washi taped on to my pin board. So I wanted to bring that to life. And let me just show you close-ups of it. So bringing this to life was a lot of fun. I had to trace out the letters, so I used the lettering that they had for the workshop, and I just had to upscale it for it to have impact. Otherwise, it would have been a lot shorter. It would have been kind of 2/3 of the height, and it wouldn't have been as punchy. And I wanted the word one to really punch, because it's that thing of one thing at a time, not 10 things, one thing. So I wanted it bold, I wanted it in caps. I wanted it to be dark to have that punch, so I needed to find a light colour. So the blue is linen from their scrap box. And then behind it there is some like peachy felt, again, scrap box. And then as I did the other letters, I was like, how do I do the joined up writing? That's going to be a pain to draw and cut out. And I had a look around what we had to use to decorate. We had some like tassels and some like little pom-poms and things, which I didn't really want on mine. I realised they had lots of other trims. That's what I'm looking for, trims. And there was this blue webbing, about 1 inch wide, and then there was this gold ribbon stuff. It came in 2 different widths. I realised that the kind of 1.5 cm width wasn't much of, so I wouldn't have been able to go as far along. And then there is the 1 cm width, which not only was it narrower, that made it stand out more against that blue, the width difference between the webbing back and the gold. And I'm so happy with that. I was so terrified that word thing was not going to come out as well as it does, because it's really difficult. So I pinned the blue down, stitched it down. I then had to go off and do something else. When I came back, I then had to pin so carefully to make sure that the gold would stand out, the placement of it would work for it to really punch. Even just looking at it now.
Do not adjust your volume. There were some issues. My mic that I had on, I accidentally pressed the button as I was faffing and the sound stopped. I filmed for another 10 minutes talking about the banner and it caught none of the sound. I'm furious. So to finish up talking about the banner, I'm going to try, I made some notes watching the muted 10 minutes to talk about the final bits. It was very hard to lip read myself. Yeah, so the banner, I was so proud of Thing and how it's turned out. Like, yeah, I was worried about that part because the other letters are so bold. I'll stand this side. So bold. Give it a bit of a border. So the at A, I made those in a style that they suggested for their banners. They had some template letters and some examples of how they're stitched on. So this was slightly different style. The kind of one was in the style of the letters they had. But Atta, again, going back to the post-it note and how I'd drawn it out. So I've done that and then used some top stitching. So the machines we used at Made My Wardrobe, they were the Pfaff Passport 2 and they have, I want to say 70 different stitches on, plenty, loads of different types. So it's because I went to their workshop last year, used the machines, that's when I decided to get my Ambition 620, which has 135 plus an alphabet, which I'll show you in a second. So yeah, using some of the fancy stitches, which are excellent, I use that to create the atta. So I'll show you some close-ups so you can see it. I think these were letters I was most worried about standing out, and I decided we've got the constant blue through the letters, and also taking that yellow from the thing, that's when I decided to use the yellow on the green atta, just to make it pop a little bit, then deciding which sides I wanted to stitch it on, and yeah, I'm actually quite chuffed with how that turned out. And then the time, again, it's kind of hand-drawn letters where the pen doesn't come off, they're all attached, and try and decide the best way of doing that. And originally, when I scrawled it out into 3D letters that I could cut out, the letters were quite sharp, so I ended up looking at it and then trimming around the corners of the letters to soften them into like bubble letters, and I actually really liked how it looked. And then I just had to play with fabric, and because I'd cut it out in pink fabric, pink paper that I was given to play with, I actually quite liked that. And again, keeping the blue theme going, I found some blue felt, and then in the scrap box I found this lovely pink, and I thought actually it's a really nice contrast. It's that light on dark, which I hadn't done since the thing, and it's kind of a reflection on the one, because that's blue on pink, so this is then pink on blue. And then I looked at the stitching again, so I did keep my stitches. I had lots of, I played around with the scrap pieces that I had to see the fancy stitches and see what looked right. And in the end, I really like this very simple stitch to attach the pink onto the blue, and I used a dark pink, so it kind of stood out without distracting from the letters. And yeah, so that's how I did time. And then I made sure I centered the letters, so I actually folded my piece twice, so lengthways and widthways, found my center point, and then I placed the one at the top, and then I worked on all the layout, had photos, and then I was able to start stitching down. And then yeah, and one of the main things, again, going back to fancy stitches, so when I created my backdrop, as I've mentioned, the zigzagging stitches, so placing the fabric onto interfacing and everything and securing it with zigzag stitches. Because my machine has so many fancy stitches, I wanted to play around with that top stitching rather than zigzags, which are pretty standard, having a play with some of the others. So I think some stood out more than others. Let me have a look. So I've got some like flowers, I've got some nice kind of border ones with lines, wiggly ones, circular ones, there's leafy ones, just some zigzags, some solid ones. So I didn't do it often, but I did it in a few places. And so when it came to finishing the border, you can see my bottom hem has not been finished. It does droop down at this end. That was deliberate choice by me, because to finish the banner we straightened the edges, took off, they were fairly straight anyway, but just to even it out so we could fold under and hide that raw edge. So I overlocked and then we folded under, and to top stitch, rather than just do a straight stitch, I decided to do a zigzag, and then every so often where I met a patch that had used a fancy stitch, or every so often where there wasn't one for a while, I would change to a fancy stitch. And what was quite fun was I just turned around to Emma and said, pick a number between 1 and 70, or I think maybe I said 12 because there was a few buttonhole options. So did that, and so my edges have got zigzags and some fancy stitches. And then for the top, there is actually a space where I can put like a bit of doweling or wood through and hang it properly rather than my trouser hangers. And to secure that, again, I didn't want to just do a plain stitch. There's no plain stitches on here. So I, one of the stitches that were shouted out for the sides. Number 12, I think it was on the machine. It's quite a wide stitch, almost like a rectangular on an angle stitch like that, and just repeats itself. And I thought that's quite a kind of strong stitch to hold down the folded down edge to create the channel for the doweling. So I used that, so it's not just a standard one, just to catch that folded over fabric. And again, I only folded down once with the overlocked edge, actually zigzagged edge. I decided it doesn't need overlocker, everything's being used with just a normal standard sewing machine. One last thing, so since bringing it home, there was one thing it really did need, and that was a label. So I brought home the scraps that I played with all my stitches, which who knows where it is, it's probably been packed away. And then I've got this lovely little scrap of blue felt. This was used for the backing of the word time. And it's a really odd shape. And Emma said that she wanted a label for the back, and I said my machine's got stitches. It's got a little alphabet stitch, and I've made her labels before. So she sent me what she wanted, which is essentially this, but the word Emma. So I took some of her scrap fabric and then stitched this for her in a nice kind of canvasy. So I did the same for mine, and Lydia once called us the dynamic duo because we keep coming back to her workshops. So that's our little hashtag. I had to freestyle the hashtag. It's not brilliant, but it will do for a label. So I need to actually attach that to the back so you can see it. I could put it on the front, I guess. I sometimes have artwork and cards that I've been sent, postcards and things. So yeah, you might see sometimes I've got my guinea pig and my llama for my murder mystery quilt. The next block is out this week, time of filming. So it'll be interesting to see what I've got to do this month. But going back to banners, would I make another one? Hell yeah. I really enjoyed the process. I'll carry on scrap busting, whether that's for banners or other things. One thing I didn't show you when I was editing, I realised, was, and I'll pan you round, this is my overlocker cover. This was probably the first thing that I patched together. Surprised I didn't share it before. But I worked out the size and dimensions just like my sewing machine, because it had a very boring plastic cover, which I've like mounted this to. It's got a nice little length to it, so I can tuck it under, tuck it in when it's not being used. But again, it's just odd pieces that I've stitched together, all remnants from things I've made. Dresses, some bed sheets that I turned into a dress, and some pyjamas, top, I'm going to presume some trousers, shirt. So yeah, it's all just pieced together with zigzags. There's no interfacing on this. This was literally just stitching it together to create the shape. And I probably would have trimmed down into either squares or triangles. So just kind of, yeah, not quite squaring off, but kind of. So I just created the shape. So I've got that angle there. And I love it. Against that yellow as well. So that keeps her nicely tucked away. So the scrap busting will continue. I've got a few ideas, but for now I need to pack and move house. So yeah, ideas are going to be locked away for another time whilst I work on some other projects. So yeah, I know my banner's not for everyone, but it is very me. I'm really proud of it and what we did. It was a great weekend. So if you get a chance to do it, do go along to Made My Wardrobe and check out the banner making course. It's lots of fun. If you have any questions, do pop them in the comments or contact me over on Instagram. I'll happily answer any questions about my banner, the workshops and the workshop space. It's a lovely space. The workshop wasn't run by Lydia, it was Jamila and wasn't Anna, it was Jess. She's got a great team of teachers, they were lovely, and yeah, definitely go along. And until next time, take care, happy making, and see you soon.